The climate in the community, just like the climate in the Australian Labor Party, is changing.
We must not say to gay and lesbian Australians, you're almost equal and that's good enough. Almost equal is not good enough.
I can see no good argument for allowing only opposite-sex couples to formalise and celebrate their relationships through marriage.
If instead lesser rights were proposed on the basis of race or age or class or any other attribute, there would not be a person in this hall who would countenance it.
Every great change has a time, and the time for this great change has come.
Next December, it'll be 40 years since the longest unbroken period of Conservative rule in Australian history came to an end. 40 years since Gough Whitlam became Prime Minister and his campaign slogan, "It's Time," became immortalised in what was undoubtedly the most successful piece of political advertising of its era. While the slogan's musical setting, which you've just been listening to, might make contemporary audiences cringe, 40 years ago there's no questioning that it accurately captured and effectively communicated the mood and aspirations of a nation desperate to redefine itself and break with the orthodoxies of the past. In the recent debate on same-sex marriage, the "It's Time" slogan has resurfaced as the title of a 2-minute-long video by advocacy group GetUp. 3 weeks after its release, the video has received over 4.2 million views on video sharing website YouTube. The video is shot from the first-person perspective, forcing the viewer to experience the highs and lows of a typical relationship without ever knowing the gender of the main character's unseen partner. Then, at the very end of the video, following a marriage proposal, the identity of the partner is revealed as he steps out from behind the camera to share in a loving embrace with his husband-to-be. It's a very powerful, emotional plea for equality, and one which doesn't appeal to the civil rights implications, but stresses the similarities between same-sex and opposite-sex relationships. American newspaper editors and Washington insiders are calling for a similar approach to be adopted in the United States, and there is a Facebook campaign to have the advertisement aired on commercial networks in that country. So it seems that GetUp's "It's Time" has the potential to mark a seismic shift in the way in which campaigners overseas go about pitching their message of marriage equality. This morning on Barry Drive, I'll ask whether it's an approach that ought to be adopted. Paul Mackay is the Director of Media and Communications at GetUp Australia. Over the last few months, he's been leading GetUp's campaign for marriage equality. Paul, could you take us through how GetUp came to be involved in this movement for marriage equality and what your campaign has sort of involved?
Yeah, certainly. We have been involved in gay rights campaigning for quite some time, but on the specific issue of marriage equality, really we came to campaign in earnest from the end of the previous federal election. Marriage equality bubbled to the surface as an issue that many Australians really cared about, even though neither of the major parties was addressing it. We fought the last election on a number of things, but marriage equality wasn't one of those, even though it was consistently polling as an issue that people really cared about. And that's where we started our campaign, because what we really try to do is give ordinary Australians the tools to create political change. So if it's something people want, and it certainly fits within a progressive agenda, we really seek to mobilise people to take political actions that enforce that change. And over the course of the intervening 18 months or so, we've certainly done a lot to do that, from commissioning polling with our members, to fronting the media, to running newspaper ads, and all sorts of other things, including a monster petition, which reached just shy of 150,000 signees before it was presented to a lot of the Labor Party's left faction on the Friday before the vote, to a couple of TV ads, one of which has seen a lot of airplay across the internet over the last couple of weeks. The first ad we produced earlier this year, and we launched on Valentine's Day to coincide with that romantic occasion, featured two twin brothers, one of whom was gay, the other was straight, and they explained that they had gone through their entire life experiencing the same things and having the same opportunities, even to the point where the gay brother was the best man at his brother's wedding, and then they explored what it meant to, at this juncture, have the gay brother not be able to have his relationship recognised in the same way, and not be able to have his brother act as a best man at a wedding. So it was our first foray into TV. We then did a little bit of work getting out the story of Carl Katter, who's obviously the half-brother of federal MP Bob Katter. But all the way through that, I should say, the idea that we'd had for the video that went viral and we released just 2 short weeks ago was bubbling around the surface, and we knew it was an ad we wanted to make. But not always does a good idea coincide with good political strategy, and that's what we had to do because we run on the smell of an oily rag. But in this occasion, we thought, what is it that we can do to ramp up a bit of pressure to get people talking about this issue with 1 week to go into a conference? And we took a punt that this might be a video or an idea that resonated with people, and it certainly seems to have done that over the course of the past fortnight.
The Advocate, the American LGBT interest magazine, posted that it was possibly the most beautiful ad for marriage equality we've seen. Can you describe what the message of the ad is and why you think it's been so powerful?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are a whole heap of reasons why we made the ad, and I think equally a whole heap of reasons why it has been universally accepted and really had a lot of people watch and enjoy it. When we first started talking about what it might look like to make a video for marriage equality over a year ago, we really wanted to take people on a journey. Marriage equality as an issue is one that, for most Australians, when asked point blank, is a no-brainer. If you say to someone, do you agree that gay people should have the same rights as other people and be able to marry? Polling has shown consistently that over 60% of Australians say yes and agree to that. But it hasn't really taken hold as an issue that people care enough to vote on or to be politically active on. And I think that's because so many of the politicians and the campaigners who have been driving the other side of this say that this is a fringe issue that only affects a certain section of our population and a small section of our population. So we shouldn't tinker with our traditional idea of marriage. And I think where we were coming from and where so many others have come from is that that's fundamentally flawed, because this issue isn't a fringe issue that only affects the people that will be allowed to be married if the law changes. It's fundamentally an issue about equality, and it's about eliminating from our federal law discrimination, law that actively excludes certain sections of our population from an institution that's freely available to the rest of us. So what we really wanted to do was try to start communicating to people that you've got to go from agreeing with us to being angry that change hasn't occurred and really want to do that. And one of the ways that we wanted to do that was really highlight to people how flawed the idea was that the love that is shared by people in same-sex relationships is somehow not as worthy or is inferior to the love shared by others. So this ad tried to accomplish that on a number of fronts. One of the main messages of the ad that we wanted to convey was that love is equal, and therefore so too should marriage be. And so we really wanted to find a way of visually representing how love is equal and how that manifests. And what rose to the top as the idea is what you may have seen on your computer, on your TV screens, and that is a couple going through all of the milestones of relationships that occur, every day of the week. You see a couple meet, you see them share those first butterflies of that meeting, you see them go on their first date, you see them introduce each other to friends and then, of course, their family. You see them move in together, and importantly, you see them go through hardships and some struggles, but they're there to support each other. And then you see them sharing a really joyous moment with those family and friends, and then, of course, a proposal. I think it's at that point that we hope people have either picked up on what we're trying to say and are with us, or get hit by the reveal and start to really question why in 2011 we still have law in this land that blocks these people from experiencing the same form of recognition for that relationship as other people have and can often take for granted.
There was one thing about the video, though, that kind of troubled me a little bit, and that is that, in movies and television shows and theatre, when a man proposes to a woman, and it is normally that way around, they usually, the question's popped and it's kind of awkward and there's a hesitation and then they say yes and then they kiss passionately. But in the video, they don't kiss, they only hug. Was that a conscious choice?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot about the video that isn't necessarily 100% an accurate portrayal of everything that would happen. But as I said before about change coming gradually and not overnight, we really made a conscious decision to keep things as tidy as possible and as unconfrontational as possible. I mean, there are a lot of focus group testing around how the community interacts with portrayals of gay and lesbian people on the screen. And really sadly, there are a whole heap of things that we needed to avoid, like featuring the couple in bed. Lots of focus group testing shows that a large section of our population is uncomfortable with the idea of two men in bed together. So we sought to avoid that as a thing. And so to a final conclusion of a loving embrace as opposed to a passionate kiss, we thought was an adequate replacement that would avoid some of those tensions. We've received not a great deal, but certainly criticism from people on a number of other fronts on the ad, particularly from people suggesting that maybe the ad was shot in too heteronormative a fashion, that being that the guys are very middle of the road, white, upper middle class, good looking blokes who do very, in inverted commas, normal Australian things. And some of the criticism we've got has been, gay relationships come in all shapes and sizes. They don't conform to norms. Why should we have to fit this plain white bread stereotype to be deserving of marriage? And I couldn't agree more. Yes, all relationships come in different shapes and sizes, and none are less deserving than any others. But we're at a space in time where this debate is on the cusp of really taking hold of something that Australians care about, or remaining where so many of our more conservative politicians would like it, being in the fringes. And we're just trying to do all we can not to, I don't want to say normalize, because I don't want to change the way anyone is. And I think it's terrible to say that, you're only allowed to get married if you're a good-looking white man like Julian Shaw is. But that certainly was a conscious decision as the way we wanted to portray it, knowing that the video would be, devoured by masses of people and hopefully appreciated and hopefully spark conversation.
As a medium of communication, advertising brings with it its own restrictions and conventions that obviously need to be taken into account when analysing how to pitch the message of any social movement. Perhaps the most obvious of these is the restriction of time, which necessarily results in an organisation like GetUp having to make choices about what type of relationship, and in this case what type of homosexual identity, they will portray. I put it to Paul that GetUp's decision to ground their call for marriage equality upon the portrayal of such a middle-of-the-road, non-confrontational, white-bread same-sex relationship might risk simply shifting the burden of inequality to those who do not conform to the archetypal identity that they've portrayed. It was a critique that he was quick to dismiss.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's why we have talked for so long about marriage equality as opposed to gay marriage, to encompass, full equality under the law for people who don't recognise as gay or lesbian, but are certainly intersex or transgender and the like. And so I think that I take the criticism, but we're not there yet. And we win the campaign in inches, not yards, and we will get to a point where there is full equality under the law and for people of all shapes and sizes. But in this particular space and time, it didn't necessarily make sense. Certainly, we could have portrayed someone with purple hair and piercings having rampant sex and the like, and that might be fine. That might be an accurate portrayal of one person. But certainly, we have portrayed someone else who a lot of people can connect with and relate with, and that was the strategic decision made. I would love to get to the point where there is full equality for everyone, and nobody has to conform to any sort of stereotype or picture that is comfortable for the rest of society to devour. And certainly, I think we're very fortunate to live in a country where that is the case, when by and large anyone with any sort of look or feel or shape or size can live their life freely. And this is just one stumbling block, albeit a big one, of federal legislation that we're trying to overcome, but that change will come slowly. Surely, but slowly.
Paul Mackay, Media and Communications Director of GetUp Australia. He delivered a petition bearing almost 150,000 signatures to the left faction of the ALP at this month's Labor conference. 2 days later, ACT Deputy Chief Minister Andrew Barr, who is also the head of Rainbow Labor, moved the successful motion to amend the Labor Party's policy platform to support same-sex marriage. The minister described the significance of GetUp's involvement in the campaign.
GetUp have played a really important role. To be able to be there the day before the conference debate and receive a petition of more than 140,000 signatures was a really important boost to the campaign. And then the fact that those ads were running leading up to the conference vote was critical. So it shows that if you are actually going to get an outcome, you need a combination of factors. You need those strong grassroots campaigns. You obviously need a degree of political leadership, and you need it to you need that to come together at the right moment.
In terms of the message in the ad, what for you makes it so powerful?
I think the capacity to tell an average, everyday story, and in a way that you could tell it was building to something, but then that final reveal at the end, is very powerful. But the idea that all relationships are equal, that sort of story of love, of the highs and lows of life, can apply equally to a same-sex couple as to a heterosexual couple. That ad could have finished with him proposing to his girlfriend as much as to his boyfriend. So I think it was very cleverly constructed, and the message, I think, was universal, and that's why it's received such strong acclaim, not just in Australia but around the world.
Is there the problem or the potential risk, however, that in sort of sanitising or being very conscious to only portray sort of middle of the ground, very attractive white males, and very sort of conservative portrayals of gay relationships, same-sex relationships, that we sort of legitimise in a tacit way the views of people who find the notion of two men in bed together uncomfortable?
Good question. I think there is that risk. Yes, gay relationships come in many different forms and many different shapes and sizes even. So it's always going to be difficult in presenting a single ad unless the essential theme of the ad is the diversity. To be able to characterise all relationships through the eyes of one couple. This, I think, is perhaps so common of all advertising that you look at, well, who are you pitching your message at? And in the context of this debate in Australia, it is the views of Middle Australia, the people who are perhaps disengaged from the passion and the emotion of the issue. There's a proportion of Australia who, regardless of the power of the argument, have a religious conviction that will see them always oppose marriage equality. Equally, there's a proportion of Australia that implicitly supports it, and would find almost any argument against it. They just wouldn't agree either. So this campaign is won and lost in the middle ground, as are so many political debates in Australia. You need only look at how electorates vote, the focus that there is on the middle 50 electorates in Australia. There's 150 seats in the House of Reps. In any given election, Labor will win 50 and the Conservative parties will win 50, and who governs is decided in the middle 50 seats, and that's where this campaign will be won and lost as well.
I raised the point about the conspicuous absence of the kiss from the marriage proposal scene with the minister. In movies and theatre, we're used to this, the moment when the question's popped, usually by a male to a female, and there's kind of this awkward, "Oh, will she say yes?" And then people are kind of watching, and then she says yes, and they're all very relieved and very happy, and then the two involved in the kind of proposal kiss passionately. But in the video, in the GetUp ad, they didn't kiss, they hugged.
Now that you mention it, that is true, yeah. Oh no, I suppose maybe they could do a retake. I'm sure there'd be plenty of volunteers to be the boyfriend, I think.
The minister accepted the reasons advanced by Paul Mackay for the conscious decision by GetUp to go with an embrace rather than a kiss.
Well, I imagine their research is right. So in constructing a campaign, they've probably done what you would expect in advertising. I think it goes to show just how far society perhaps still has to go on accepting difference. I think it's a reasonable point, but again, in advertising, I think you've got to send home a message, and that's what they did. Maybe future campaigns, may be able to go that little bit further.
Andrew Barr, Deputy Chief Minister of the Australian Capital Territory and the head of Rainbow Labor. Rodney Croome, the campaign coordinator of Australian Marriage Equality, was not prepared to accept the focus group research cited by GetUp's Paul Mackay.
I've heard other people critique the ad in the same way, saying that they felt that a kiss would have been more appropriate than an embrace. Actually, my response was that I felt an embrace was perfectly natural. If I imagine myself in that situation, in front of my family, proposing to my partner, and if he accepted that, which of course I hope he would.
You'd do a thorough background check first to make sure he would say yes.
Yeah, and probably try and find ways to suss it out before I was going to propose in public. But if I did propose in public, and particularly in front of my family and friends, then I think an embrace would make perfect sense, because it's not just about me and him; it's about all of us.
Sure, but regardless,
if I chose to do it in a public place, then I wouldn't want there to be a moment that would exclude others. I wanted it to be a moment that would include others, I think in some ways an embrace is more inclusive, not because a kiss is more confronting for people, but because it's more intimate and between the partners. An embrace is someone that anyone can share. So I felt the embrace was fine.
Yeah,
and
look,
I didn't have a problem with it.
I agree with you in terms of the, it was a communal setting, and yeah, it was a really inclusive moment. But the fact that Paul, who was involved intimately in the kind of creation of this campaign, he said that it was a conscious decision, taking into account the fact that they felt strategically and as a political ad, that it was more beneficial for them to avoid scenes like the couple in bed, and specifically also that it was a conscious choice not to have a kiss. So
yes, well,
is it concerning?
I disagree. I'd say that I think the overwhelming majority of people who have viewed that ad wouldn't be confronted or turned off by a kiss between two men, particularly given the story that's gone before. So I think that, and I'd contest that research. I mean, clearly there are same-sex kisses on television that don't see people throwing stones at their TV sets. I mean,
indeed.
I think we've moved on for that. So I guess what I'm saying is that even though it might have been for the wrong reason, I think it was quite an appropriate quite an appropriate scene.
Lanae Erickson is the Deputy Director of Social Policy and Politics at moderate think tank Third Way, which is based in Washington, D.C. She has been featured in a variety of media outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, USA Today and Time, and has appeared on Fox News and Air America. On the 5th of December, an op-ed piece by Miss Erickson appeared in The Advocate, in which she urged gay rights advocates in America to learn a lesson from Down Under and adopt the approach of the GetUp ad. I asked her to explain why she felt the ad could be of use for campaigners in America.
So we do a lot of research on trying to understand how to kind of move along people who are struggling with this issue, people who feel conflicted about it and have kind of mixed opinions. And I think the reason that this video is so potentially useful for those people is that it really conveys that gay couples are very much more similar to straight couples than they are different from them. It shows that, they go through the similar kind of trials and tribulations. It shows this couple going through adversity together, facing really difficult circumstances, and it shows that they're really making a commitment to each other, and, that's why they're in the relationship, is they want to make a promise to each other and a commitment to each other, and that's how most straight couples see their own marriages and relationships as well. So I think, it shows that there's that similarity there that people can really identify with.
And you said in your article, your op-ed piece for The Advocate, that there was a misperception in the United States among some in the community about the intention of gay couples who wish to marry. Can you elaborate upon what that misperception is?
Yeah, we have done polls and psychological research and focus groups to try to understand what was holding people back from supporting marriage for gay couples. And one of the big problems was that people really thought that gay couples weren't wanting to marry for the same reasons that straight couples were. They thought their intention was to get some basket of rights or legal protections, not to kind of make a public promise to each other and to have a lifetime commitment and take care of each other for life, which is what most straight couples intend to do when they promise marriage to each other. Because a lot of the advocacy, at least in the United States, has focused around the importance of these rights. And that's what legal marriage is really about. It is these rights that you can obtain and the legal protections. But by focusing so much on, tax benefits and hospital visitation and sharing a spouse's pension, it was really reinforcing this idea that gay couples are just trying to get something. They're trying to get something for nothing. They're trying to, turn marriage into something it's not, which is really a legal contract between two people that doesn't have to do with anyone else. And, that's just not how most, at least American straight couples, think about their own marriages. They really think about their marriages as something that's part of a community and, part of their friends and family taking part in that promise. And it's not really about the rights. Most people don't kind of get married in order to get an immigration status or in order to get some tax benefits. They do it because they want to profess their love and commitment to someone.
In an ideal world, I guess, the perceptions of the majority in terms of the perceived intent of people in whatever kind of relationship surely should not influence whether they have that relationship recognised. And so by framing the campaigns to focus upon the normalcy or the similarities and to directly pitch it to address these perceptions of the majority, are gay rights advocates potentially legitimising the view that it is actually up to the majority to sanction what they deem to be appropriate?
Yeah, I think there are some folks in the LGBT advocacy community who would say, who cares what the perception is? This is a right that we should have, and they're not wrong about that. It's just that the way that progress happens on this issue is through convincing people to agree with us, and part of doing that is meeting them where they are and understanding the misperceptions and stereotypes they might have about gay couples. In some of our research, people thought that gay couples were really not capable of monogamy or not intending to be faithful to each other, or, that they were kind of more selfish than straight couples, that they were just in it for the fun and games, but when things got really hard, they wouldn't be there anymore. And those perceptions are, they're out there, and if we can't kind of meet people where they are to change those if we instead just kind of go through the courts and don't really care about bringing the public along with us, I think it can be a harder road for the whole country. You know, we can see kind of blowback from that if, for example, you know, the courts get ahead of where public opinion is. We've seen this on other issues in the United States, like abortion, and it just creates a really divisive situation in the country where we're essentially at odds for many, many decades to come. But on this issue, we're moving so quickly. Internationally and in the United States and in Australia, things are moving very rapidly on this issue. So there's a lot of ability to bring people along with us. And there might be folks that think, you know, who cares? I'm just going to go to the court and get my rights. But our perspective is it's better to bring the country along with us, because then in, you know, 10 or 15 years, we can all look back and realize that this was a really important step in America's journey towards being more inclusive and equal.
Amy Bransell recently wrote in the Journal of Lesbian and Gay Studies that in attempting to obtain same-sex marriage rights, gays and lesbians are forced to ask for equal rights on the basis of their similarity to homosexuals, which is tantamount to conceding that they deserve what heterosexuals have only as long as they look and behave like them.
Right.
Is that like, for me, that's a huge concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certainly arguments that you can make in that vein, but I think the really good thing about kind of breaking down, the really good thing about the kind of commitment framework about reminding people that gay couples are more similar to straight couples than they are different, is that you're actually breaking down those stereotypes and bringing people to a better place. And so then we can have a further conversation. But I think, you know, there are ways in which you know, there's a big generational gap in terms of what people's goals are. So I think there are a lot of folks who, you know, are older gay people who see their kind of identity in the LGBT community as being an outsider of kind of mainstream America. And it's very different to grow up in a situation where you know, see gay people on TV, where the White House and the Secretary of State are making you know, big proclamations about the importance of protecting LGBT people. So those folks just may not feel as much like outsiders in the first place, and it might not be as important to them to maintain that separation between you know, an outsider LGBT kind of existence and you know, seeing themselves as part of a larger community of which that is one piece of their identity. So I think at least here there's a big division among generations on that point. And I know a lot of folks who are in their, you know, 20s and 30s who want to get married, and I know folks who are in their, you know, 50s and 60s who don't think that should be the goal of the LGBT movement at all. Who think we should be working on other things. But I think a lot of it is about kind of, you know, their life experiences and how it was to be gay, you know, in the time that they spent most of their lives.
In a similar vein to the last question, is there a potential in the United States, you know, from your experience and from the research that Third Way has done, that when we finally move this sort of barrier of exclusion to finally include same-sex relationships within the institution of marriage, is there not the potential that we simply we move the kind of border between who's in and who's out, but we still leave some people out, those who don't comply with the sort of mainstream, loving, committed, monogamous relationships that we see portrayed in ads like GetUp's ad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always a danger of doing that. I think we've seen that in the civil rights movement, in the women's rights movement, that, you know, the more mainstream people in every other way get kind of included into the tent, and then there are others who are left out. That certainly was true of lesbians with the women's rights movement. And, you know, they were a very integral part of the beginning of the women's rights movement, and then they were kind of sidelined. I think that the biggest concern in terms of that is kind of leaving out transgender people. And we've seen a big piece of legislation kind of fall apart and be incredibly divisive within the community Here, a couple of years ago, there was a debate about the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and there were, two sides to that debate within the community. There were folks who said, well, if we can't get protections for transgender people, we should go ahead without them. And there were other folks who said, no, that's not appropriate. We should stand together, and if we pass it without protections for the entire community, then it's not worth it. And that's where I see the division really coming. And I do think that, that's something people need to be very cognizant of and careful of. We've done a lot of work around that issue as well, and we're very pro fully inclusive employment non-discrimination, so making sure that it has both the gender identity and the sexual orientation protections, and that's an important piece of making sure that the entire community gets brought into the tent.
After referring to Paul Mackay's comment about focus group research finding that the depiction of two men in bed together might make a significant part of society uncomfortable, I mentioned that I thought this was incredibly sad. The notion that such a simple thing had to be avoided to make the ad acceptable to the viewing public. Her response made it clear that campaigners in the United States have to deal with an altogether more hostile environment when it comes to attitudes towards homosexuality.
Well, I'll do you one better than that. We've seen research that has shown two people sitting too close together on a couch talking about their relationship has kind of turned people off. There are very deep kind of reptilian responses that people have around picturing kind of sexual relations, and they recoil from whatever you're trying to tell them in the commercial by focusing on that piece. And we've seen it over and over again among those people who are still harboring some homophobia and who are obviously still trying to talk through and get to the right place, and they're struggling. So I think it totally depends on your goal. It sounds like their goal was to persuade those folks that are still struggling with some stereotypes and some homophobia, and I think that was probably a right decision not to turn them off at the end with a kiss. But it is sad, and I think we'll get there, and we're getting there quickly. But I think even 5 years ago, those people probably would have been turned off by the hug too, because we've come a really long ways. And one of the things we were looking at was how much things have changed since the Defense of Marriage Act was passed here in 1996. And at that point, only 1/3 of the country thought that a gay couple living together raising a child was a family, and now 2/3 say that. So we've just had a huge change in kind of perceptions of gay people, a huge change in acceptance, and I think we'll continue to make progress on that. But probably the kiss would have been a bridge too far for those folks who are a little squeamish in the middle at this point.
That was Lanae Erickson, the Deputy Director of Social Policy at Washington think tank Third Way. Daniel Wein is the co-founder of It's Time Marriage Equality, a group in the US that is campaigning to have GetUp's advertisement aired on American commercial networks. So Daniel, you are heading up a push in the United States to have the GetUp ad aired on commercial networks there. Can you tell us a bit about what's motivated you to do that and how that campaign is going so far?
Of course, yeah. I saw the ad for the first time a few weeks ago, and I know that the ad was specifically made and marketed for a key Australian vote that took place shortly after the ad was released. And what I don't think the organization really expected is that it has a really universal appeal. The ad has a very universal appeal, and once the ad went viral on YouTube, people really all around the world recognized that it speaks to the commitment that I think a lot of gay and lesbian couples really around the world are looking for in the acceptance. And I started a campaign to get it aired in the United States, and over the last few weeks, I've been really surprised by the amount of support that we've been receiving, and we actually formed as a nonprofit organization this past week, and we're working with various organizations and individuals in the United States and really North America to, first of all, make sure that the message of this ad and the ad itself doesn't kind of fade fade away, because that's kind of how viral videos work. They have their popularity and then they kind of fade away and people forget about it. And we want to make sure that, one, this is a really spectacular ad. It's very well made. The message is very, very well done and right on point. And we want to make sure that not only is it not forgotten about, but it's able to reach a larger audience, not just in Australia, but in the United States.
Sure. And so in terms of that message, in your own words, what is that message for you that it conveys so effectively?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that this ad is so effective is really the reveal at the end. It plays off kind of the classic boy meets girl story. And for the first 2 minutes that you're watching the ad, or the first, I guess, minute and 50 seconds, you assume that you're watching a love story and narrative between a heterosexual couple. And the reveal at the end really beats the viewer to the punch. The viewer spends the majority of the ad thinking that they're watching an ad about a heterosexual couple, and they draw the parallels between that. And at the end, when it's revealed that, you know what, it's a gay couple, and with the exception of the sexual orientation and the gender of the individuals, how they fell in love and the commitment that they felt to each other is exactly the same. I think that's the message of the ad, and I think that's what not just the movement in the United States, but really gay rights movements around the world have been looking to convey. And I think that this ad has done it in one of the most effective manners I've ever seen. And that's why we want to make sure that more people are able to see this ad.
I put the typical marriage proposal formula to Daniel and noted that in the GetUp ad, the passionate kiss that we're so familiar with was missing. I asked him for his reaction to that omission.
An interesting observation. I think that that's just perhaps one way that they decide to show their affection. I think that, I actually hadn't really thought that through. I think that one of the things about watching this ad several times over is that you continue to see new things about it, and I think that the different layers of the relationship building, the more you watch it, the more you kind of are able to pick out specific things, because obviously this ad was created as part of a very real advocacy campaign to get votes. And they were the GetUp team was probably very strategic with every scene that they put in there. So I'm definitely going to rewatch it and look at that. It's not something I really noticed. But I think that taking the entire ad as a whole, looking at kind of the theme of commitment and the theme of really equating the relationship as being equal, which is kind of the whole purpose of the reveal, I definitely think that if the ad was exposed to a greater audience in the United States, hopefully that you would be able to move towards broader acceptance that it looks like Australia is coming around to as well.
In the ongoing fight for equality for LGBTI people in Australia and overseas, it will be very important that advocates look closely at the objectives of any campaign that they are considering adopting to ensure that they do not transplant something that would undermine their message if it was deployed in a different context. GetUp's mission, as an organisation, is to mobilise and amplify progressive voices within our community, and as Paul Mackay made clear, the purpose of its time was to get Australians who already agree that same-sex couples deserve equal rights to make their opinion known to their politicians, to get angry that change has not already occurred. The fight for marriage equality is incredibly important, but must be viewed as a complex and multifaceted one. Campaigns that target one demographic for one purpose will not necessarily transplant effectively to another cultural market. I'm Michael Wright, and you're listening to Barry Drive. Thanks to Victor White for technical assistance for this feature. Thanks also to Chris and Kurt Steele and to all of our guests on today's show.